No amplification at all.
Hello, welcome everybody. I mean, this is not very strong as a microphone, but however, welcome everybody to this session. After the morning panel debate, we are now going to have a closer look on how these really very inspiring projects can they be evaluated? Can we have a level of quality measurement? Is it possible with projects that use music for social means, for socio-cultural dialogue? And I'm very happy that the EMC board member Erling Aksdal has agreed to moderate that session, and I'm very happy to also welcome the speakers of this session, which will be introduced by Erling during the session. So enjoy and have very good debates.
Okay. Hello everybody. Do you hear me? Do the interpreters hear me? No? You okay? Yeah. Welcome to this session with the topic music as a tool for social change. As a musician, I feel it's almost repulsive to think of music as a tool. I mean, it can't be a tool. Music is music. But of course it can be a tool also, like anything else. But I think in order for us to think about music as a tool, we have to think about music in a certain way, and I think maybe the way that we usually think of music superficially, which is that music is some kind of activity. It is something that we do together. It's collaborative, it's cooperation, it's interactive, it's experience, it's I should have known. I should have known. Okay. It's enjoyment, it's all these things, it's performance, it's all these things that we think of when we think of music in a very quick and superficial way. And I think it's in that sense we can more readily think of music as a tool also, because it brings people together, it brings people together in many ways. But music is also something else. I mean, music has so many aspects to it. Music is so many things. But another way of regarding music is as deep culture. And then it's harder to think about it as a tool. I mean, deep culture in the sense of language, deep culture in the sense of having a grammar and a syntax that is really unique to that specific language. Not necessarily unique, but it does have these features different from other languages, musical languages that have other features. And the role that music as language plays as for coherence, identity, things like that. And also music as art with its intrinsic value and a value unto itself. It's much harder to think of music as a tool in that context. And I think we should keep that in mind too, because these are important aspects of social life. Maybe not as obvious, and maybe not it's in a more subtle way, and it's harder to measure also. But to really take music seriously as a cultural value, as comparable to language, is also important for thinking of it as having a social value. So, and thinking of it as language, did you ever hear the phrase language as a tool for social change? No. So that kind of perception of music as an object, as a tool, comes from somewhere else. It doesn't come from the deep culture perception of it. Anyway, I'll introduce the speakers here one by one. And the way we will do it is that each speaker will speak, and then you can ask questions a few questions and make comments, and then we go on like that. Always, when you ask questions or comments, we need a microphone, and it's not because you wouldn't be able to hear the questions here, but the interpreters will need it. So wait until you get the microphone. And then when we finish, we will have a discussion up here among the speakers, and you can join in. So, the first speaker is José Luis Castiñeira de Dios from Argentina. He is a composer, orchestra conductor, university professor, researcher, arts critic, and recently film director. Born in Buenos Aires, he was forced to leave the country for political reasons in 1977 and came back in 1989. In 1994, he was elected as the first president of the Ibero-American Music Council. Since 2008, he has served as National Director of Fine Arts at the Secretary of Culture in Argentina. I would suggest that you use, you stand over there, and you use, I'll turn on the microphone for you. It's down here, it's a red button. No, it's there. So, you can use that over there, please. So please welcome José. Oh, by the way, he will do his speech in French, so if you need the translation, please.
Just a joke.
Okay.
What is success? What is success? Everybody.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
Sacas una fotito, salieron todos corriendo, qué éxito tuve. La verdad que tuve un éxito impresionante. Se fueron todos. ¿Y ahora qué me queda por hacer ya para que vuelvan? Vuelvan, por favor. Vuelvan.
Por fin lo tengo.
Regresen, por favor, regresen.
Dice, ¿qué éxito?
Regresen.
¿Cómo puedo tener éxito ahora? Empezar a hablar inglés y vuelven todos. Ah, ¿vos querés que yo toque una...?
Que me saques una foto.
Hoy yo soy un tronco para sacar fotos.
¿Sí?
¿Sí? ¿Vos sabés?
Bueno.
Espera, decime cómo está el chat.
Aquí. Ese redondito. No, es como aquí.
That's mine.
Well, with this successful beginning, I think I can begin with my speech, which I'm going to divide in two parts. The first part is in English, and the second in French. It is not about the conflict we have with the United Kingdom about Malvinas, but you have to understand that that I prefer not to bore you on the second part. The first part is simply the reading of the questions that I think are you hear me? Yes? Yes, it's okay? Yes? No, it's that. I think it's... Yes. Hello? The ticks are out of question. Hay que apagar esos. Well, if we consider the extraordinary development of young chamber or symphonic orchestras ensembles created with social proposals in Latin America and all over the world, we are obliged to ask several sensible questions on that subject. First, when we use musical practices as social instruments, are we forgetting the main value of music as a particular expressive language and artistic activity with no other objective than human expression? Second, when we ask music to solve social problems that society doesn't find a solution for, are we not asking too much of music and musicians? Third, if we find a boy who plays drums excellently in a escola de samba in a favela in Rio de Janeiro, and we make a comparison with a boy who plays Mozart very badly in a symphonic orchestra of a social program, do we consider the second one as an integrated child and the first one as a marginal? 4. When the Simone Bolivar Youth Orchestra from the Venezuelan system, Maestro Abreu, conducted by Dudamel, makes an European tournée, they play the Mahler symphonies. Are we not educating again with the reactionary idea of an European 19th music as the highest summit ever reached by humanity? 5. Which is the place for contemporary and popular music and popular music in all those social projects? Where is the cultural diversity showed in the cultural diversity showed in their concert programs? 6. Are the orchestral symphonic programs working to open minds about contemporary music or to sustain the cultural identities, or is a new way to continue with an European centrism in an academic music? Well, all these questions, I think there are very sensible questions. We find it everywhere with the extraordinary development of the social programs of young orchestras. People doesn't understand which are the risks we are in which we are falling, and I think it's very important to think about it and to find answers valuable for the new generations. And we made in Latin America a new program, a new cooperation, a musical cooperation program, who is called Ibermúsicas, and is beginning next year. About 12 Ibero-American countries are in this new project, and I want to explain you about this experience in French. Comme vous savez bien, il n'y a pas pour les Amériques, pour la région ibéro-américaine, un Maastricht. Il n'y a pas un système multilatéral de coopération. Ça veut dire que la seule institution qui existe dans le terme de la coopération, c'est la réunion des chefs d'État. C'est ce qu'on appelle la cumbre des chefs d'État qui fait une réunion une fois par an, et dans lesquels on traite de différents thèmes. Et il y a un secrétariat pour la culture qui s'appelle CEGIB. Bon, dans ces domaines créés à partir des années 90, il y a 2 programmes qui ont très très bien marché, même 3. Le premier, c'est qui s'appelle Ibermedia, dédié à l'audiovisuel et qui a beaucoup contribué à la production cinématographique dans les Amériques. On peut dire que la plupart des productions cinématographiques audiovisuelles des dernières années, d'une autre façon, travaillent avec les programmes Ibermedia. Et après Iber-Scène, que c'est pour le théâtre, surtout pour le théâtre indépendant. Et maintenant, nous travaillons pour la création de ces nouveaux espaces de coopération que c'est Ibermúsicas. Moi, j'avais vécu une expérience similaire dans les années 90, quand on avait créé CIMUS, le Conseil ibéro-américain de la musique, entre les États membres qui avaient de la région ibéro-américaine. Et ça a duré apparemment 3 ou 4 ans, avec une faiblesse très grande, qui c'était une forte participation surtout de l'État espagnol et de la société des auteurs, la SGAE, qui avait appuyé très fortement ces projets et qui est devenu d'une façon ou d'une autre un peu le leader du projet. Une fois que l'État espagnol, pour un changement de politique, quand les socialistes ont quitté le pouvoir et Aznar est venu pour la première fois, il a coupé l'appui et le programme s'est arrêté. Maintenant, nous sommes en train de le recommencer, mais beaucoup plus appuyé dans la participation des États latino-américains. L'idée, c'est d'avoir un espace de coopération dans des différents domaines, la formation, la création, la distribution, les appuis aux industries culturelles, et travailler sur l'idée d'un mix entre les appuis publics et privés. Le monde de la musique industrielle, le marché, avait été assez indépendant de la participation des États jusqu'aux dernières années. Mais les dernières dizaines d'années ont vu apparaître, c'est assez important de remarquer, une nécessité, un besoin et chaque fois plus importante des participations de l'État pour soutenir l'activité musicale. Jusqu'au présent, le marché pouvait soutenir l'opéra, soutenir les disques, soutenir les artistes à travers du travail industriel, mais maintenant avec les disques ou n'importe quel support, c'est un énigme, vraiment on ne sait pas qu'est-ce que ça va devenir, et avec certaines activités musicales comme l'opéra, comme le ballet, c'est chaque fois de produire indépendamment ces spectacles. Et la télévision s'éloigne chaque fois plus, au lieu de s'approcher au phénomène artistique de la musique. Alors, comment faire pour soutenir toute cette activité, parce que de l'autre côté, il n'y a pas eu jamais telle quantité de musiciens comme il y a aujourd'hui. Et on le compte je crois, pour des millions de musiciens au territoire des Amériques. Une activité musicale énorme, une créativité qui ne s'arrête, une participation populaire chaque fois plus forte, avec des expériences comme celle du Brésil, comme de la Colombie, qui sont des expériences d'une énorme créativité, où la musique, justement, a été appelée pour arriver à soutenir cette action que le gouvernement n'arrivait pas à trouver une solution. Dans le cas de la Colombie, avec les programmes La musique pour la paix, qui a été développé un peu partout, et avec un succès assez important, on l'a vu dans le cas de la ville de Medellín, pour la lutte contre le trafic, la drogue, la violence. Dans le cas du Brésil, ou avec les programmes de ce qu'on appelle puntos de cultura, on a pu redistribuer les budgets publics entre des associations de la vie culturelle brésilienne, et avec une participation beaucoup plus démocratique qui soutient beaucoup plus maintenant la diversité culturelle. L'exemple d'Olodum, le groupe Olodum et tout le monde d'Olodum à Bahia, c'est un exemple de ce qu'on peut faire avec la musique. Ça veut dire que ça a changé énormément de choses dans la région. Alors, pourquoi je me posais telle question au début de ma participation? Parce qu'en même temps, je ne veux pas me suicider et penser que les musiciens, nous allons résoudre des choses que la politique n'a pas pu résoudre. Ça veut dire, c'est vrai que la musique peut aider à refermer, comme on dit, certains plaies de la société. Mais ce n'est pas l'objectif précis de la musique. L'objectif de la musique, c'est un objectif en soi-même, que c'est l'expression artistique, l'expression spirituelle, la communication humaine, la création. Si à part tout ça sert à d'autres intérêts de la société, c'est bien. Mais c'est un peu comme l'utilisation qui a fait l'armée toujours de la musique sans lui demander, n'est-ce pas? La musique militaire a été utile pour la société dans des différents moments de leur histoire. Mais ce n'est pas peut-être l'objectif qu'on devrait essayer d'arriver dans les prochains siècles. Et en même temps, parce que moi, je me demande avec inquiétude pour le problème du néocolonialisme culturel représenté par, spécialement par ces expériences des orchestres de jeunes qui travaillent très fortement sur un modèle d'un orchestre qui n'est pas même un orchestre du XXe siècle. Le modèle, c'est l'orchestre Strauss, disons, comme le dernier compositeur du XIXe siècle, avec des jeunes qui jouent des instruments partout dans le monde, des instruments qui ont acquis le maximum de développement dans les années 1600-1700, et qui n'a pas aucun espace pour la création contemporaine et pour le grand fait, la grande nouveauté du XXe siècle, que c'est l'arrivée des musiques populaires au niveau artistique comparable à l'histoire des musiques, des traditions européennes. Ça veut dire que si on oublie maintenant, si on n'arrive pas à mettre dans le même sac le tango, le jazz, les expériences du XXe siècle de la musique populaire, les musiques africaines, les musiques brésiliennes, alors on se demande sur quelle base, si on ne commence pas à créer un nouveau monstre qui sera le futur de ces jeunes, parce que ces jeunes, quand ils arrivent à ça, ils arrivent avec l'innocence de suivre un modèle. Et ce modèle, c'est un modèle qui, d'une façon, représente une exclusion future. Parce que il faut savoir que ces orchestres ne seront pas pour jouer la musique à leur culture. Ça ne va pas servir à soutenir leur identité culturelle, et il ne va pas avoir d'espace pour les créateurs de son temps. Ça, c'est sûr, c'est garanti. Alors, il faut dire, pour ajouter encore une préoccupation, que c'est triste que les politiciens, moi je suis un musicien qui a des responsabilités politiques, je ne suis pas un professionnel de la politique. Mais je vois tout le temps les hommes de la politique qui aiment bien faire la photo avec les enfants, avec les petits indiens, avec les violons d'un indien de 10 ans. Mais après, ces mêmes politiciens ne sont pas capables de créer un orchestre de chambre dans leur ville quand ils sont maires. Ils ne sont pas capables, ils ne veulent pas entendre parler de ça. C'est une idée que pour eux, c'est une responsabilité de l'État. Ce n'est pas une responsabilité de l'État. Alors, encore une possibilité de frustration pour ceux qui étudient dans ces milieux cette façon de faire la musique, que ce n'est pas la seule, ni que ne doit pas être la seule dans toutes les cultures du monde. Bon, ce sont toutes ces réflexions avec lesquelles je vais ouvrir le feu. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, José. The next speaker is his work, Rebecca Lee. She is a consultant, musician, and educator whose practice combines creative work with organizational development. She has been in school and community projects, as well as contributing her own sound, art, and recording. As a consultant, she has led the evaluation of several national and regional arts projects for clients including Engage and Large. So, welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you. This is working okay? Yep, great, okay. Okay, so yes, as you said, I do combine work as a consultant, as well as creative work as a practitioner and sound artist. And this presentation is to share with you an approach that I've been using. It's not my approach, it's one that I've been led to work in, and I think is useful for creative practitioners and those involved in community arts, not just music, but community arts projects. And it's generally referred to as participatory evaluation or shared evaluation. You have to bear with me if this goes. I'll try and get it back again. One of the things that I kind of observe when it comes to talking about evaluation, talking with community practitioners, community artists, those that lead community projects or development projects in the arts, is that evaluation is a mysterious kind of science that we try to get involved with. We kind of do what we feel we should do as much as possible, but it's not something that is part of our work. It's quite detached from the creative processes, kind of collaborative processes, the skills that we use in our everyday work, facilitation, that kind of thing. It's something slightly different, my the idea behind participatory evaluation is that you can extend not only the values that you use in your work that guide you as an organisation potentially to take on certain projects, but also as a practitioner, as a leader of a creative project. The reason I put this picture up is. It's not self-promotion, but kind of is. But this is a piece it just worked. It was music, it was trees. This is a piece I created this summer called Great Chorus, which combined a lot of people's thoughts about using music about the woods they visited to create a new piece, and it just was quite a nice kind of mixture of images there. Okay, so. The extension of the collaborative and creative processes in a project. Reason that participatory evaluation, the reason it sort of shares these values is that it can start to kind of extend, what's behind your work. The values that guide you to do creative projects, for example, that collaboration is a positive thing, that people all have something to give, that diversity of ideas and opinions is valuable, and then as we lead on, that we set up an open process. So if this is a collaborative music process, it's about being open. It's about creating a safe space, a floor in which people can share, bring different things. Everyone's perspective and different value systems are valid and involved, and we make it collaborative. And in a kind of in an evaluation situation, the idea of being collaborative for me extends way back to the planning phases as well. So I'm talking about collaborating over what you as a project agree are the objectives. We talked earlier on, we've talked a lot about, there's a really nice quote, Erling, at the beginning of your article about somebody having intentions to do good to you and just wanting to run away. I think thinking of setting up a project, my intention is to do this. I think what's really good with this kind of participatory approach is that you can remove the self and you can say, this is, as a project, these are our collective ideas. Now that means we fill in funding applications and we have to say what we're going to do, and that's possible to say. But you can also include in that as a group we will confirm and finalise these aims and objectives. So that's kind of thing I'm thinking about. The last sort of the last point here is that actually you can extend what we do creatively into evaluation. It becomes part and parcel of what you're doing. There's the picture here is a very small example of how this can work and how it can work effectively. It's a project I did with some young teenagers who are excluded from mainstream education and go to a complementary education centre. And the idea being that they go there and that they eventually will get back to school. And they were, for me at the time when I was doing this project, were very challenging. I'd not worked with a group like that before. And we were doing a lot of work, as I say, as a sound artist, we were doing a lot of work with field recordings, recording our voices. And for them, recording voices is it has strange. For them, it's kind of linked to kind of being the fact that most of them have been interviewed by the police at various points, this kind of thing, and weren't very happy about recording their voices and them being heard. At the end of the project, because it was about sound, being outside, we did lots of environmental recordings and creating music from that. At the end of the project, I set up a wassail, which is when you sing at trees to make them flower fruit next year better. And they thought this was the most ridiculous idea anyone had ever suggested to them. It did involve making a nice drink and this kind of thing, but what you also can do at a wassail is put wishes in trees. And so in order to kind of finish off the project, and it was a very small project and there was a small group, but also to involve a kind of element of evaluation, we made wishes and put them in the trees, but we recorded them as sound waves so that they would stay our own wishes. No one else could read them or hear them. And that doesn't sound very useful for evaluation in itself, but in a conversation between me and the teacher that came with them from school, the art teacher, who very bravely decided to bring them out to the woods to a contemporary art organisation when their complementary education centre just normally sends them to camping training, kind of scouts type stuff, outdoor education, to get their energy out. It was then useful in a conversation between me and her that I could say that this young man who just stayed with me on my own in a room, everybody went out, and he said, and I sort of asked what his wish was for the year, and he said, well, to get back into school again. And then everyone else comes back in the room again. He's swearing and swears at me, swears at everyone else. But that was what he wanted to record, to put in the tree. He asked me if he could hang my wish in the tree as well. And a conversation, therefore, a structured conversation, a meeting with the teacher at the end meant we could make a decision, or she could feed back to me or think about what that meant that he said that, and the journey he'd been on as part of the project. And that's turned out a bit longer than I expected to talk about. But so you start to kind of get the idea, I hope, that you start to make use of the skills that you have as a practitioner, you make use of. So facilitation, making a safe space, like I said. The reason why, again, this can be useful is that we work in the arts, we work in music. They're complicated projects, and I think we tend to feel that evaluation should be a really simple report with some kind of bullet points, and then that's all kind of tidied up. Evaluation isn't about tidying it up. Evaluation needs to kind of reflect the complexity of projects. There are lots of people involved, there are lots of different starting points, lots of different kinds of journeys involved. So I think this approach actually does justice to the people that you're working with, in that their perspectives are involved, and the complex picture, potentially kind of difficult to deal with picture is reflected. It also ensures that the ownership of this information stays with the participants of the project, and reflects all the standpoints and perspectives that are involved. And it also means that you can feed this back to your funders and create a far truer picture of what has happened. In addition, I think most people would agree that reflective practice, reflection with a group, only embeds learning further, rather than ruining. Quite often we present people with questionnaires at the end of a project. They've had a brilliant time, and then we say, well, our funder requires you to fill in this 10-page questionnaire, please, thank you very much, which actually is not written in a language they potentially understand. It immediately reminds them that this project is actually about something other than them. So this kind of approach brings it, hopefully brings it back. And, it starts to communicate what it is about music projects that makes it not, we hear there's lots of different ways of doing community development, social change. You hear lots of football, sports projects, lots of community gardening projects around me in Nottingham. It's why music project, why, start to kind of share and express what it is about a music project that makes it different to a community football project, or that kind of thing, and also in one way it takes the formality out of it. It makes the process something that people want to get involved in, or have ownership over. One last one. I'm just trying to remember the time. So how to go about to doing this? It's as I said before, it doesn't make it doesn't take the thorns out of evaluation. It's a difficult process, it can be. But it starts to kind of separate out what's yours and what's your funders, for example. What's really important, which is why I've put woods and trees. This is one of the boys I worked with, searching for interesting sounds. I quite like the idea of searching for interesting things when it comes to evaluation. It's important to start kind of sorting out what's really going on. The big long list of questions that kind of go with the writing for this session. It's useful to start looking at those lists and kind of thinking, well, actually, what's solvable? What's something we have to think about? There are, as we're all aware, there are research methods, and our third speaker will talk about these. There are formal research methods for social projects, that aim to have a social impact. And it's possible to find answers to those, but what's difficult to find answers for, and what we have to do the thinking about, is why we're doing them, what our aim and objectives are. Do our participants understand that? Again, are we just going in and saying this is what we're going to do? Going back to the discussion we had earlier about the valuing culture within a project, particularly a project that's about sharing culture. Why can't a project be set up and administrated and kind of evaluated in a way that suits everybody's methods of working, their sort of ways of going about planning a project, so that you kind of start to involve. It doesn't, as I say, it doesn't make it less complicated, but it starts to put the people who this project is about kind of back at the centre of the project, hopefully. So intentions and aims are, I think, something to really to pull out. We can put together meetings. They're administratively difficult to get everyone in the same room at times, but we can do all that. The thing that requires is a lot of thinking about why we're there and what we're doing it for. And then, in turn, that leads on to planning how you're going to carry it out and ensuring you're resourcing it as though it were part of the project, as though you valued what your people have, what people you've been involved with have to say about things. And then, again, if we're truly evaluating for ourselves and looking to develop understanding and make the next project we do better, then it puts you and your participants in an even better place to think about how you're going to run a project next, rather than just hurriedly filling in the forms, getting them in, and kind of remembering what was good about it. And I know myself that that's something we do because we're pushed for time, we're pushed for resources. But it's just looking back over the projects that I've kind of run, before coming here, I was kind of thinking I might share a really good case study where I'd done like a completely perfectly participatory evaluation of a project, and I couldn't find one that was in every stage of the way perfect, because they're not, because there were strains on my time. There were funders, two different funders, who wanted to know different things, and had actually quite different ideas about what we were doing. But I think what I tried to do was that this idea about those people who I'm working with being part of this research altogether into something new was at the centre of it. And also that certainly helped my funders to remember why they were doing what they were doing also. So it's never perfect. My last kind of small example was that I was working on a project actually evaluating visual arts in galleries across the UK. And it was accredited placements for vulnerable young people who were outside of training and education and jobs. And they had a young persons group actually help run the project, and with my support they did some interviewing of the participants. And now I did interviewing with the participants too, and that was useful, and they were great because I explained to them why I was there and what I was doing and how much I valued their input. So we had a good kind of level where we worked together. But the questions that the young people asked of the young people were even more effective, and I'd encourage them to think creatively about how they might ask these questions. So one of them, the questions they came up with was that if this project was an animal, what would it be? And again, this is something we do in our every day. We set up a new creative situation to get someone to respond, to come up with some lyrics, to come up with a new kind of song and to get them out of themselves. And one person said, and he explained to me that it was good, and he explained to me that it was different to what he'd done before in the past. But in response to this question from his peers, he said it was a lion because he'd never been more proud of anything in his entire life. And having met him and and spoken to him, he's very self-contained, but actually that one quote kind of summed up the entire project, particularly for the funders that I was working with, and because I use quotes in my evaluation reports, actually they were able to then make use of that further in advocacy and that kind of thing. I mean, advocacy and evaluation is a whole other topic, but yeah, I hope that gives you an introduction at least. I am running a workshop at 4:30 that just sort of starts to look at some of those issues some more, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca. I said earlier that we would have questions and comments after each presentation, but I see now that we may be running late, so if it's okay with you, try to remember the questions and comments you had during the speech, so we can come back to them. The next speaker is Olivier Urbain, PhD, is director of the TODA Institute for Global Peace and Policy Research and founder of the Transcend Art and Peace Network, TAP. He is the editor of Music and Conflict Transformation from 2008 and co-editor of Music and Solidarity 2011. He is preparing a volume on music and freedom. Please welcome Olivier.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. So I'd like to discuss together about measuring musical social change. That means, of course, positive social change through musical activities. Is it possible to measure it? For whom? Why? All those questions. So I'd like to talk about 3 case studies. The first one started with Roger Whitley. He is a street musician playing music on the street in Santa Monica in California. And this whole organization called Playing for Change started from that man. It's really amazing. In March 2005, Mark Johnson meets Roger Whitley in Santa Monica. And Whitley was singing Stand By Me on the street. And Johnson, he's a technician and a producer, and he thought, wow, this is really, really wonderful. The whole world should know about this. So he organized a mobile filming and recording technique, and it became a DVD called Songs Around the World. Not only Roger Whitley, but he went all around the world with his team to film street musicians. One impact on society, at least if you count the society of street musicians, is that instead of having a few people on the street, now they have 30 million viewers through YouTube, through that organization. That really changed their lives. It's already one result. Another result is that, is just illustrating what I just said. Here we go. Another result is that they established a foundation. They're so successful, they established a foundation and started to build actual schools. In 2007, they established the Playing for Change Foundation, followed the next year by Timeless Media, which generates a lot of funds for those projects. This year, they already built 7 schools in South Africa, in Ghana, Mali, Rwanda, and 3 in Nepal. I'd like to insist on one fact, is that they are very aware of the dangers of cultural neo-imperialism and neo-colonialism. What they do is that, whether it's in Nepal or in Ghana, they use the local music that people have been singing and playing for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. All they do is they bring a building and they bring funding for the teachers, but the teachers live there. They're just people who can play instruments, but because of the economic situation there, they have to work other things. But now they can become music teachers of their own music. So I think this is very important. They are not bringing Western music in a Western setting. They're just facilitating the emergence of the local music. So, for example, in their mission statement, they say, these are not our schools. Each school belongs to the people in the community. The community is invested in the school and its success The people create the energy that the schools and the community need to succeed. Of course, if you interview the children who are now able to learn their own from their own fathers and ancestors, definitely there is an impact in the society. And so their targets, they finished now 2/3 of those targets, 10 programs, 750 students, 150 jobs created. They already accomplished 2/3 of that. Now I have some questions, and I feel a little bit frustrated about what I see, things that are missing from that project. What about having surveys with control groups? You go to one of the villages where children are playing music and you stay there for 1 year with them. That would be a wonderful PhD project for a student. And then you have a control group, a village not too far with absolutely no music. You do interviews, you do surveys, and you compare both. Who could contradict you if you do that seriously? There could be statistical analysis of school attendance, and I even would encourage them to have a worldwide center for evaluation of all their projects. Now they have 7, but they will have more. Now we'll go to the second case study. We go from the world to Japan. The Min-on Concert Association, it's a Japanese word, Min-shu Ongaku, so it's an abbreviation. It means the music for the people. The original goal was to make live musical performances accessible to ordinary people in all parts of Japan. It was established by Daisaku Ikeda in 1963. And since that time, they have organized more than 70,000 concerts attended by more than 100 million people, not in one concert, okay, it's since 63, gradually, inviting musicians from more than 100 different countries. I'm pretty sure Estonia is one of the 100, to perform in Japan. And they have more than 1 million Japanese volunteers who distribute or sell the tickets and do the publicity. So it really involves a big chunk of Japanese society in music. The most spectacular thing they've done, I think, is to bring the whole Scala of Milan to Japan. The whole 500 artists, 80 trucks. The only thing they missed was the building. Can we measure the impact of their work? Well, here is one interview that was given to me by the director of Min-on last year. A 60-year-old man, that interview is about 10 years old. For 60 years, he didn't change his mind about something crucial in his life. But then by going to one performance, he completely changed. This is the quote translation from the Japanese. I really didn't want to come. I had bad feelings towards Russia because of the Northern Territories dispute. I used to live in Kushiro and Nemuro, which were occupied by Russia. However, I came here today, and when I heard the music and the singing, I could not hold my tears, which flowed freely throughout the performance. I realized then that I should not judge people based on stereotypes. The people of Russia are now my friends for all eternity. There's just one, but is there a way to systematically receive those testimonies of people who changed their lives through one performance? Northern Territory, you can see on the top right, 1875, Russia was a little bit there. All the islands were Japanese. Then there was the Pacific War, the Second World War, and now in 1945 is bottom left. So this man was living in all those islands and had to evacuate. But then with the concert of Russian singers and dancers, his spirit was able to soar above discrimination. And our last example is El Sistema. I think we've heard it already 10 times today. Very controversial, I know, but I want to take one aspect of it. There are today 250,000 people learning music for free in Venezuela, thanks to that group. They have 125 youth orchestras, 31 symphony orchestras. It started in 1975. It was called then Social Action for Music. And José Abreu was in the garage in Venezuela with 11 kids. And he had these big dreams with 11 people. So one of their greatest success is the Simone Youth Ensemble, which is a world-class orchestra that goes all over the world. And of course the famous conductor, the star, So how do you do this? Well, you go to the poorest part of Caracas, where you have millions of people living with no roads, no sewage, barely enough water, and very unreliable electricity, incredible poverty, high level of criminality. So you go there, and then you bring music teachers, a bunch of instruments, and what you get? You get this. Those are the same people. They were supposed to do drugs, to die young, to be extremely poor their whole life, and now they are playing music. Some of them become professionals, they tour around the world. I think it's really remarkable, and the big star, Dudt, was probably supposed to live also in a poor area of Caracas. And of course, people, it's not they leave the areas, that those areas are transformed. One quote from José Abreu: "In their essence, the orchestra and the choir are much more than artistic structures. They are examples and schools of social life, because to sing and to play together means to intimately coexist towards perfection and excellence, following a strict discipline of organization and coordination in order to seek the harmonic interdependence of instruments." So in the defense of El Sistema, I'd like to say that you can do this with any kind of music. It doesn't have to be Western classical music. Why did Abreu do that? Because that was his experience. As a kid, he learned classical music. He thought it was fantastic. He thought every kid in my country should have that chance. So he's reproducing what he learned. But in Afghanistan, you can use local folkloric Afghan music. You can have this too, exactly the same philosophy. So a research question from a cold academic would be, how can one measure the social impact of El Sistema? All right, that's my job. I am a cold academic, actually. Well, interviews. One interview that was published in a newspaper. René Arias, practicing his French horn at a home for abandoned and abused children, when asked what he would be doing if he had not joined El Sistema, replies, "I'd be where I was, only further down the line, either dead or still living on the street, smoking crack like when I was 8. I think that's a good evaluation of this project. I mean, if you can have a few hundreds of thousands of those evaluations, that would be even better. Another evaluation. On June 6, 2007, the Inter-American Development Bank granted a loan of $150 million to El Sistema. I think they should have given it to them, but okay, it's better than nothing. It's a loan. The bank had conducted studies on the more than 2 million young people educated in El Sistema, which means cumulatively from 1975, 2 million people only in Venezuela have been educated through that system. The bank did surveys to see where their money was going. Participation in the program was linked to improvements in school attendance, declines in juvenile delinquency, and a decline in crime. And I really don't know how they did this, but I'd like to find out. The bank calculated that every dollar invested in El Sistema was reaping about $1.68 in social dividends. Wow. I think that's very important to know, because if you invest $1 in a machine gun, I think the social effects are going to be pretty in the red. Have to think about that, you know, in a world where we spend hundreds of billions of dollars buying weapons. Yes, well, sorry, that's my style. Yes, the impact, don't ask questions, I just imposed things. Oh, that's terrible. Yes, the impact is measurable through interviews, surveys, and statistics. El Sistema is now developing in Colombia, in the UK, in the US, in other countries. A recommendation for them? What about a worldwide network collecting the data in each community and country, centralizing the results, all those surveys like the interview I showed? What about having many, many of them? Now let's discuss, to finish my presentation, about evaluation itself. So we're measuring the impact of what? Sounds, air that touches your ear, rhythms, is that what we evaluate? I don't think so. It's about us, it's about people. So I'd like to mention the philosophy of Christopher Small, who unfortunately passed away 3 weeks ago. And he invented a new verb, which is the verb to music. I music, you music, we music. Because for him, music is action. And this is his own definition, is one of his 3 major books. To music is to take part in any capacity in a musical performance, whether by performing, by listening, by rehearsing or practicing, by providing material for performance, what is called composing, or by dancing. So it is also not only about sounds and rhythms. major book, Music King. He continues, we might at times even extend its meaning to what the person is doing who takes the tickets at the door. Those people are transforming society by being there. It's not about just sounds. Or the cleaners who clean up after everyone else has gone. They too are all contributing to the nature of the event that is a musical performance. So when we talk about evaluating music, we're evaluating all that. It's huge. Second thing about evaluation, measuring the impact of music or musicking on what? Well, on people's life, on society, and for that we have to know where we are at. And I think the basic right of human beings is to stay alive. I don't know about you, but that's a right I really hold dear. And we don't even know how many people get killed in our societies, or how many people get killed when we go and liberate other countries and teach them democracy. Because governments know, they have satellites, they have everything, they know how many people are killed. But they don't tell us. So we don't know what's going on. But there is now a counter movement. There are researchers in Oxford, and I'd like to talk about my friend Glenn Page, who established the Center for Global Non-Killing. The mission of the Center for Global Non-Killing is to promote change towards the measurable goal of a killing-free society. So the goal is to arrive at 0 unnatural deaths. Cannot avoid cancer and those things, or natural death, but being killed by a thief because the thief didn't have enough money to survive, we can avoid that by giving money to the thief so he can survive, or whatever, you know. So we need to know what kind of world we live in if we want to change it for the better. Then finally, how do we measure the impact of musicking on social change? That's just something I wrote. The social impact of musical programs on their participants, their well-being, relationships, social skills, quality of life, and their communities and societies, levels of criminality, health, hygiene, cohesion, can be measured through surveys, interviews, ethnography, statistics, and more. The challenge is this data collection and analysis needs to be done in a more systematic, organized, strategic, and global fashion. Because there are so many wonderful projects. I never heard about this project in Afghanistan until this morning. It's a scandal. I should have known. But where's the website that centralizes that data? Now, I didn't know for sure what happened in Egypt. This really incredible woman who was at the center of the revolution with music. I didn't know. We should know. We should have, I don't know, for example, the IMC or the MC at random might have resources to organize a little bit better that data, so we know what is happening. So I'd like to explain my last, maybe to take 1 minute for the very last slide. I ask a question. Is now the right time to establish a global task force? Global, I mean, that would be able to collect data from all over the world, from villages, from towns, not just from one country, but from all over the world. Task force, because it sounds really strong for us musicians who have a really human heart, but it could be a team of 2 first. 2 people exchanging information and making it grow, just a team. A research center for measuring musical social change. If you tell governments that if they invest more in all kinds of music, their people will be more educated, they have more social skills, they're going to be employed better, they're going to share resources better. As a result, they will have to invest less in anti-terrorist measures and all those things. They're not going to believe us. They're not going to believe us. But if we start this group and within 5 years we have hard data, very well organized, and we don't go and get the data, we let it come, we let it emerge from the people. Oh, I have this project in a small village in Nepal. Send it to us, we'll put it on the website, we'll publish the books about it. Then governments can look at this and, oh wow, there's really something going on. It's not the Arab Spring anymore, it's the world spring, where the heart of the people can come out. I hope I did it in 20 minutes. Last night I did 19 minutes in my room. I hope I beat my record. Thank you very much for your attention. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olivier. The next speaker is Eugene Skeef. There you are. A musician, composer, educationalist, key specialism in cultural development, conflict resolution and creative leadership, co-led literacy campaign across apartheid South Africa, runs UK-based charity Umoja Creations, developed education programs of major UK orchestras, shortlisted for PRS New Music Award 2010, artistic director of Quartet of Peace Project. Welcome, Eugene. Because of the translators. There are people
I'm sorry.
speaking English here.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought it was just Zulu that wasn't understood here. Yeah, lovely. Okay. The letters behind my name, FRSA, stand for Fellow of the Royal Society of the Arts. Unlike in my two brothers from home there who were provoking me and making a joke about it, they thought it stood for Federal Republic of South Africa. Okay? I'm from South Africa anyway, and I grew up in a culture in my mother's home where it was understood that music precedes us, music predates us, and it will always be there, it will live beyond us as humans. So we need to be humble in its presence. That's the first point. The second one is that in my mother's yard, I grew up in a very violent part of South Africa, in a township called Indunduma, which can be loosely translated in an idiophonic sense as thunder in the hills. There was a lot of violence and squalor and a lot of poverty and a lot of police and military brutality. I grew up in the presence of that. And the safest place in the entire ghetto, in the entire township, was my mother and father's home. That is a fact. There was no place that it was safer to be than in the home I grew up in as a kid. And the poverty of my family was redeemed by the fact that we had fruit growing as a gift of nature, avocados, guavas, mangoes, pawpaws, you name it. So I remain, reasonably fresh and fit right now. However, in my home, in the midst of all that violence, all the downcast people, all the outcasts of the ghetto, all the dogs, the literal dogs, the woof-woof type dogs that were run over by cars, cats, gangsters, political activists ended up in my home. Because as I say, it was the safest place, but it was the most dynamic place to share experiences and not be bothered by the gangsters. Even the gangsters would hide their guns and their machetes at the end of our gate in order not to be left out of the fun. And they would come and participate in the beauty and joy of sharing life. That is the home I grew up in. That experience even influenced people like the Ladysmith Black Mambazo, if you've heard of them. They practiced their music in my home in the 60s. And Iskatamia, it's called, because they wear white trainers and they step lightly. Ukatama in my language, in Zulu, which is my first language. Ukatama means to step softly. And in the township and in the mines, in the, the hostels of the mine workers and all those migrant and traveling workers, if you made a noise, your neighbor wasn't very happy about it. You lived on top of each other. So my home in the township of Indunduma was the place where they came to develop their craft. That experience and my experience of Steve Biko infuses everything that I do. That is my life. So my piece is called Rhythm for Life. based on what I've just described. And there's a Zulu or Nguni or Bantu expression from my part of the world that goes like this. It says, Umuntu, ngumuntu, ngabantu. And a loose translation is a person through other people. And I just felt, if you don't mind, if I could invite you just to give you a break from your silence, could you say after me so that we feel one? Umuntu,
Umuntu,
ngumuntu,
Umuntu,
ngabantu.
Ngabantu.
Thank you. So, I read now. My subtitle that I've just expressed to you comes from the Southern African Nguni ethos of Ubuntu, the nationwide assimilation of which it is believed saved South Africa from bloodshed during the transition from apartheid into our fledgling democracy. Another way of expressing this philosophy is through the phrase, I am because you are. In Zulu, my mother tongue, the word for music is ngoma. This word also relates to divine healing energy or the shamanistic rite of therapy. It is the root of sangoma, ngoma, sangoma, the word that defines one who heals through divination. My people regard music as being coterminous with life. It is one with life. We do not traditionally remove ourselves from it in order to consider it objectively. We believe that the true power of music is of a spiritual dimension and consequently cannot be fully understood from a purely formal or structural analysis. This is not an opposition to the scientific study of music, but an invitation to consider the fact that the real essence of music is completely bypassed when it is submitted to systematic scrutiny. Music is a complete world in itself. One of its chief volitional dispositions is to maintain the connections between reality and the invisible dimensions of our universe, between an individual and himself and her community, the community and society, and more. These projects that aim to bring about social change are, by definition, aimed at situations where many of these connections I've just described have already broken. For example, war zones, inner city environments, etc. Music has built-in mechanisms by which we can assess its effectiveness in a social context. A group music workshop can reveal to you, both as an external observer and as an active participant, the extent to which involvement in it transforms the participant. There is a dynamic reciprocal process that takes place. I just need some water, please, sorry. Thanks. There is a dynamic reciprocal process that takes place between the workshop participant and the unfolding music in these situations. It is that there can be no complete music without the movement of the participant, without the involvement of the participant. So the creative process of attaining the balance in this dialogue is in essence the medium of transformation we are talking about. You know that the balance has been achieved, however temporarily, when participation in the music reaches a fulfilling point of release into wholeness. Smiles emerge like graphic scores, reflecting the inner transformations that render each participant more able to enact their own story with confidence and dignity in the communal circle. A fragile, solemn threshold of emotional and spiritual overtones must of necessity be traversed to enter the consecrated space where the embodiment of music reveals this divine presence in every part of the world, and not only those saturated in major conflict of one kind or another. Where I have conducted music projects, there is a distinct moment when the invocation of this presence becomes audible. The clarity of the sound of this moment is the most unambiguous sign for me of the affirmation of the transformative power of music. The music workshop circle, in the physical sense of a circle in a music workshop, represents a creative model of a more desirable social environment for the participants. It embodies the power to temporarily bear them gently from the distressing distractions of their normal lives into a more harmonious, musically determined environment. This environment is free of these superficial distractions and avails them of a deeper awareness of self. So that's where I'm coming from. Now, I have to relate to you a very small story. I was going to show some clips relating to this guy I'm about to speak about. I don't really use the term case study, but for these purposes, for the very first time in my life, I used it in order to fit in, if you like. This guy's name is Orhan Mashlo, and he's a Bosnian guy, and I'll explain to you about him in a minute. But I tell you the story because it is about leaving a legacy. And my brother here spoke about the whole issue of sometimes there not being a legacy. You know, in our work, we move in, we do amazing work, and people praise us, and they give us lovely things, and we go, but the problem persists, you know, and we get paid handsomely, and we go in again to another place, and this goes on, you know. I think you know what I'm talking about. Now, I'm suggesting that this so-called case study, you can read about him online. He's doing amazing things now, and I'm proud to have been associated with him. Here's his story. Allow me to start by sharing with you this little story. This is a brief description of my connection to Orhan Mashlo, popularly known as Oha. I used to chant his name, Oha, Oha, and he liked it, you know. Bosnian percussionist, music workshop leader and composer who was one of my first trainees at the Pavarotti Music Center in Mostar, Bosnia, during the 2 years, 1997 and 1998, when I was sent to work there by War Child. Some of the most devastatingly horrible things happened there, but some of the greatest work that I have ever been in the presence in happened there in those 2 years. And the resonance still goes on. I get emails on a daily basis. I get Facebook friendship requests, you know, all sorts of things from people who were little boys when I met them and are now grown men doing things that fulfill what we are here to talk about. Oha accompanied me around Bosnia and Herzegovina as I visited psychiatric hospitals, youth centers, community music projects, bombed out remnants of buildings, and any open public spaces that we could find to conduct music workshops. At 13, Oha was the youngest fighter on the front line when the Bosnian War started, at 13. And something of a hero amongst his peers. He was a bright child at school, but caused his teachers problems with his natural insubordination and overly inquisitive mind. Before long, he was excluded and soon found himself emulating Rambo and other gun-toting Hollywood movie characters in the playground. He told me later that for him as a young boy, the war offered a place to exercise his disaffection with authority and the seductiveness of violence as depicted in the blockbuster movies he was addicted to. When I was employed by the British charity War Child as Director of Music Development at the then brand new Pavarotti Music Center in extensively bombed Mostar, Oha was one of the first young people I was presented with. He was also the first of the cheeky Bosnian youths I encountered who questioned and challenged what he saw as the audacity of Westerners. And I was included because I had lived in London for a couple of decades. How dare we, if you like, in the West, think we could come into his country and, in quote, help them to deal with the devastation and trauma of the recent war. Anyway, within minutes of my first drumming workshop, with about 30 teenage boys and girls from the local youth club, this lanky lad of 18 smiled and reached out to me in the center of the circle and gave me a huge hug. His acceptance of me sped round the circle like a forest fire. Not too long after this brotherly bonding, I returned from a brief visit to my family in London, loaded with more of my percussion instruments. I was asked to drum during a theater performance by a group of young drama enthusiasts. Towards the end of my solo performance, with my prized soloist djembe drum, a West African drum, you may know. It's world famous now for its power. With my prized soloist djembe strapped to my torso, I stepped in rhythm towards where Oha was seated in the audience, rocking and shaking his knees, symptomatic of someone traumatized. I could not resist the effervescence of his charming smile in appreciation of my playing. I stood before him and played like I had never before. Eventually, I settled on a call and response rhythmic pattern, demonstrating to him how I could have a musical conversation with myself. Gradually, I left the responses blank. This young man, who had never drummed before, immediately understood that these spaces on my drum, were his to fill, with an answer in his own rhythmic language. The rest of the audience started to applaud and cheer him on as he wove his personal story into our extended dialogue. Before long, he had taken the lead, and I was now responding to his statements. I shaped my wings, the wings of my hands, in exaggerated gestures, beckoning him to join me standing. He steadily stood up without stopping to play. He towered over me. I danced even closer to him. He stood there swaying in consonance with my groove, and as I pressed my drum strongly against his waist like a pelvic fulcrum of love, before disengaging my straps and placing them gently over his head and onto his undulating shoulders, I came away from him and occupied his vacant seat as he stepped with perfect timing into the center of the open clearing that served as a stage among the sparse trees and surrounding wreckage. This was the beginning of the journey that took Oha, with the gift of the djembe, to becoming one of the most sought-after hand percussionists in the former Yugoslavia. He has also become one of the top music workshop leaders, working with young disaffected people in his country, and travels throughout Europe with his band Dubiosa Collective, performing at festivals and conducting workshops with a focus on community building and social change. So how do we measure the impact or outcome of music projects with a social impetus? The business of evaluation is a tough one as far as I'm concerned. Where is the value in a culture that is generally obsessed with measurable worth? Music on the one hand and funding institutions and cultural policymakers on the other exist in parallel worlds. They communicate using diametrically opposed languages. The language of defining the social impact of music is littered with words laden with analytical presuppositions, whereas music speaks to us ever more deeply in non-verbal terms. As my friend and colleague Ansuman Biswas, the London-based Indian musician, says, the difference between a healthy society and a distressed one may be invisible by objective criteria. Is it GDP, number of interactions, or social mobility? I say social change happens between people, not objects. Change is about an alteration or modulation of being. Social change has to do with the change in the relationships between people. Relationships can only be experienced and felt by individuals. So the only meaningful evaluation of music projects for social change has to emerge from the experience of change that is felt by the participant. The individual is the key here. The concept of measuring impact is ideologically incongruous with the practice of making music with people. In the words of another friend from London, the musician Jan Hendrikse, making music with people is not primarily an impact. It is not a surgical procedure or feat of engineering. Social change grows organically. You don't engineer it. Close quotes. Jan told me a story once about his experience of working in Tanzania. He was discussing music with his friend Shafi Mrutu, who told him that African music is not primarily a performance art, but in, quote, a university without walls. He said it is where we learn to be better people, to be social beings, to live with and resolve tensions, and to have grace and poise. So I am wondering, if we are indeed asking the right questions about this music for social change, should we not rather be asking, what are the influences of a creative art that embodies social cohesion? It is like asking, what is the social impact of language, an intersubjective form of human communication without which we cannot truly be social beings? Should we not instead be more concerned about the social impact of losing communal music making, dancing, or any other shared creative activities? I would argue that it is an index of where our society is right now, that our practice of making music for social change has been reduced to an object or compartmentalized product, where it is seen as an intervention rather than the norm. The last few decades have seen the emergence of some new thinking in the field of consciousness studies. In the hard sciences, on which all social sciences are modeled, there has been dawning a realization that first-person data must be admissible. The position of an idealized objective perspective is becoming increasingly indefensible, and it seems harder to exclude the experience of being present in the context of the music making from any meaningful equation. Of all the expressive arts available to humans, music is by far the most direct and accessible vehicle for communicating and reflecting the essence of life in all its manifestations. I believe the power of music to immerse us deeply into the very core of life, while simultaneously maintaining our buoyancy on its motivational currents, resides in the seed of rhythmic vibration. The music projects I facilitate around the world are distinguished by a rhythmic intensity that raises the level of the participants' focus and deepens their sense of relaxation. This is akin to meditation, another practice that causes problems for those who have been trying to scientifically evaluate its efficacy. They come up against a brick wall until they finally take first-person data seriously. It is hard to ascertain the success of my music projects, to speak personally about them, in terms other than succumbing to their magnetic effect. To quote Biswas for the last time, in music, it is very clear that objective measurement of physical acoustics, quantized rhythms, bums on seats, etc., has almost nothing to do with the profound soul dance it can set in motion. The mystery of listening can never be fathomed if the listener is dismissed. But by diving into the magical experience of listening, sounds are imbued with a power that can transform the listener, immersing him or her in the dance. And to conclude, the maintenance of this wholeness is a delicate configuration. It requires frequent immersion in the music of the selfless circle to be sustained to a point where the participants can confidently move onto their own means of expression within the broader community and beyond. On the strength of this observation, I advocate a practice, especially in modern social settings, whereby the creative music circle I describe becomes a proactive norm and not a special, isolated, reactive environment. And of course, this is not about to happen, but it is a dream that I relish and which sustains me in my personal practice anyway. So what does this mean for those of us trying to measure the impact of music projects for social change? I believe the personal testimonial has a very important part to play. It would not be counterproductive to formalize this to some extent and introduce a certain amount of rigor in the process. Formalizing exercises in self-reflection, which are organically inherent in my type of workshop and central to participation, can help participants to assess their attitudes, feelings, and interactions before an activity and then after it. Participants can be encouraged through interviews and written descriptions to give accounts of any shifts in their own experiences that they consider important or valuable. The collation of these personal reports can then give an impression of the worth of any given project. This would go quite some distance in ensuring that we do not fall into the trap of evaluating the social impact of a project without placing at the center of the whole process the very texture of social experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. We are granted an extension. I don't know how tired you are of sitting here, but we're granted an extension. So if you want to ask some questions, we can take that shortly. What has happened here has been a major the scope of what we've been talking about, from questioning the concept of music, the way we perceive it, through criticizing the way we use the concept and how we go about our project, what we mean by music, to having alternative ways of evaluating, and even straight ahead old-fashioned ways of evaluating, and to the almost to the extent of the abandoning evaluation at all, because it's impossible. So it's quite a stretch here. So I would ask the speakers to come up and see if you can find a working microphone, and then we'd be happy to. I hope they'll be happy to answer your questions. Okay, we'll start over there. Would you?
Well, thank you all for a very diverse but extraordinarily engaging time. And evaluation is so critical. I always go back to the meaning of the word, that is to draw value from something, evalue. And Rebecca, you spoke about how important it is at the very beginning stages to decide on what will be evaluated. In other words, what is going to be set forth to be dared and learned, and because it's alpha and omega, the evaluation. And so the question of real evaluation that I would really like to put to all of you, and some of you have alluded to it, but not perhaps the last speaker, Eugene, more than others, is I've had a life of choral music with children, and so I am teaching always in groups, in ensembles. And when people perform or learn to make music in ensembles, there is much more going on than just the intrinsic nature of the music. The intrinsic nature of the music, the joy, etc., is going to be there anyway. There are always extrinsic things that are going on. But primarily, you're creating an ensemble of individuals, particularly when they're 5 years old. And so really, I have always seen my task and have always evaluated that principally as someone responsible for encouraging empathic thought and behavior so that they will learn how to build, but more importantly, to maintain community within that music making. And so I think the whole business, the initial thing for social change is when they form the ensemble, any ensemble, and how that is going to change. And I'd like to have a comment from each of you, perhaps. I mean, in terms of Abreu's work, the concept is there. They can use any repertoire they want, but it's how it's changing those lives. In other words, the word I use is to communitize, to learn to communitize.
Okay. Basically directed to you first, I think.
I'm just going to check I understand what you're asking. Are you asking about measuring that aspect or evaluating that? Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, I mean, in response to that, I think bringing evaluation or making evaluation part, this idea of reflection and as a group, and it's possible to do it as a group. There are some really effective ways of group evaluation, and actually, again, that takes the edge off having to personally respond. I think there's a way of working that through the entire thing, and I also think, if I understand you right, and it's sort of how this sort of communally do things. I think it's possible to communally evaluate. In terms of working with very small children, that's something I have done. I've worked with nursery groups quite a lot with sound and music and voice, and one of the most effective ways was through was just observation from those that have been working with the group, particularly teachers whose group they were. I facilitated, and the teachers and I tracked every week comments and this kind of thing, because the children were ever changing, as you say, as a community, and actually would have found it difficult to reflect every week on the difference. In fact, they might not have even known the difference themselves because they're experiencing it. So I don't know if that's useful kind of response in this sort of communal working. Yes.
Okay, another question here?
Yes, many people. First of all, I have to say that what Eugene expressed is something that I wished for would be the norm in society. I'm working for many years as part of a team called Music Crossroads. We are developing activities in Southern Africa. And of course, our harsh reality is that we will have to meet the expectations from donor organizations, for instance, and which is mostly based on headcounts rather than, as you say, what is actually happened. But of course, I think many people here are at this World Forum of Music to get better arguments. Or smart ideas how they can actually pursue in finding the resources to do what they want to do. So therefore, I mean, I don't have a solution on this, and of course there might be different ways at looking at evaluation, because when you write the project proposal, you put yourself in for the evaluation yourself. You state an expected result, and then you have to answer to the expected result. So perhaps we as project proposal writers are all too much into the sort of numeric thinking, the quantitative thinking rather than the qualitative.
Thank you. Can I just say something very briefly in response to that? Sorry. I just wanted to say, I just wanted to say I'm getting goosepimples, excited by what you're saying, because it's the truth. My experience, we need much more time than we have to really go deeply into some of the stuff, but hopefully we'll all maintain connections. I can tell you until the sun dies of stories of success of the guy I'm talking about, Oha, this tall guy. He's unbelievable. As I'm speaking to you, he's doing the most amazing work throughout Europe and America and Canada, and I'm taking him to South Africa hopefully soon. Because he's using the very model that I was getting passionate about, and he's having success. So I agree with you that our methodology, the techniques that we use in applying for funding need to be refreshed as well. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, one short statement, huh? Yeah.
Right, well, kind of addressing what everybody said. I'd like to suggest that evaluating the impact of musical activities is an intermediary stage to an ideal society, because what we really want is a society where the surveys are, how are you doing? What's going on in here? That's the kind of world we want. We want those kind of statistics, but we do not have that kind of world. Let's face it. We have a world where, I mean, did we ask the Libyans how they felt being bombed? No, we didn't, because we decided in advance. So, but I think to go directly from the kind of world we have now, where GDP and headcounts really matter and get the big money, to a world where each individual human being each individual animal and plant matters will be too much of a big jump. And I think music and the arts are a wonderful space in between, because even if you count things about music, already you're going towards more humanity. So I think we can work together. Thank you.
Okay, one more.
I hope I don't get too academic. My name is Philipp Küppers. I'm from the Institute of Musicology at the University in Weimar. I just want to make two comments, maybe not long question because we're out of time. First, it's interesting that if we speak of social change, we mostly speak of music as a tool for positive social change. We should not forget that music can do a lot of harm. So if you're interested in that, you can look at the Music, Conflict and State Research Group at the University in Göttingen. They're actually running a long project, I think it's 5 years, listing a lot of things where music has done a lot of harm. And the second about all these interviews and I mean, yeah, but people can tell you what you want, you know, this is so academic-wise, this is nothing. So I'm interested in, maybe for Olivier or Rebecca, if you use peace and conflict impact assessment methods in your evaluations.
Oh, yeah. You can.
Well, no, I don't do music projects, so I don't. Of course, I don't use the kind of assessment that you mentioned. But I think that's one of the things I'd like to see as a researcher, is that those who are doing it should be able to come out, express themselves. It should be available for everybody, because we don't hear those things. And yes, of course, music can be used for torture, and you get good results actually with it. Yeah, but yeah, I don't want to answer too long. But no, I don't use it, and yes, it's useful.
Yes.
The only thing I want to say is that when you think in music like an instrument or a tool, I think for integration or for for social proposal, I think there are other instruments or tools of society. For example, sport. What you say about 2,000 musicians in Venezuela, I can put you on the other side. 25 million sport players, football players in America Latina, or more than that. When you put the testimony of that boy who left the crime for the music, I can put you the testimony of Maradona who was in a favela and then by sport, etc. But I think there is a difference between sport and music. And the difference is about what Eugene talked about. It was that music is really a sacred place for society, where there are places, small, very important ideals of a society, symbolic ideas that are different of the ideals of sport, that are considerable, are respectable, but are not of the same level of symbolic references like music has. So I think that we have to think in music as music. We don't have to think in music as a tool.
I think that was the finest note we could end on. Thank you so much to the panel. Thank you, José. Thank you. And thank you so much to all of you. Good day.